There we go.
Okay. Now I can't let everyone in. We have to let everyone in.
Should I admit, I can admit them all.
Yeah, if you could. I can't get over there. Okay, hello everyone. We'll be starting momentarily. Hello everyone. Welcome to a holistic approach to creativity with TV producer and drone pilot Mike Sobola. We're so happy to have you here, Mike.
Thank
So
you.
excited to have you. We met you through one of our comedy shows.
Yes, yes.
People always ask, where do you find all these amazing, interesting people? So we're eager to hear about your work. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you about a couple other events that are coming up, including this Saturday. It's Montgomery County's Thanksgiving Day Parade in downtown Silver Spring, starting at 10 o'clock. So we hope to see you there. And then I'm with Silver Spring Town Center, as most of you know, and we are a small nonprofit based in the Silver Spring Civic Building, but we are completely virtual again during the colder months. And our next program will be on Tuesday, the November 30th at 7. It's called A Bird's Eye View, Wildlife Through the Lens of Photographer Michael Oberman. Some of you may remember Michael Oberman, who presented his book. He's also an author in addition to photographer, on his days back in the 60s and 70s in the music industry in the DMV area. And he was actually the first person to host David Bowie on his first visit to the US. So he has all kinds of interesting tales to tell. So that's Tuesday the 30th, wildlife photography with Michael Oberman, not to be missed. And then for anyone along the creative spectrum, some of you know we do quarterly art salons. We also do these creative circles. The next one is called Exploring the Sacred in Our Work with artist and poet Neha Misra. And that is Friday, December 3rd at 7:30 on Zoom. And that is open to artists, musicians, filmmakers, poets, and anyone along the creative spectrum. And all of our events are made possible with generous support from Montgomery County, United Therapeutics, the Arts and Humanities of Montgomery County, Maryland State Art, and many others. And now let's get to the program. I ask that everybody would mute themselves during the program, unless along the way Mike is welcoming comments and questions along the way. And also we are recording this. Anyway, Mike has been a drone pilot or a TV producer for much longer, and then got into drone piloting, I guess, and combining those two skills for a fascinating career. His work is also seen on Maryland State Television, right, Mike?
Maryland Public Television.
Maryland Public Television, and in various other forms. So let's get started with the program. Take it away, Mike Sobola. Tell us how to pronounce your name.
That's very close, Sobola.
Sobola. Okay, great. Mike
That's,
Sobola.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take it away.
Thank you, Lisa Martin and the Silver Spring Town Center for inviting me to speak. I hear something there. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you for taking the time to log in. Hopefully you'll find this enlightening, something you can use in your creative pursuits. Today, we're talking about, first of all, if you have a question, as she said, put it in the chat, raise your hand, or just say something if you want. Either way, Lisa will be monitoring the chat, and she can monitor, tell me your question. We can do that as we go along if you'd like. But today, We're talking about ways to tap creativity, how to reach down, pull out that part of you that you know is there, but can't always turn on and off when you need to. And I know it's a bit pretentious to call myself a creative, or you call yourself creative. And in fact, I know I have no way cornered the market on creativity. The truth is, we're all creative in our own ways. My aim today is to try and relate what's worked for me, to nurture and kind of enhance my creativity. And I hope that you find something that helps you to be more creative and productive as well. A little bit about my background. I've been a TV writer and producer for more than 25 years, a model rocket enthusiast from an early age, and most recently, I fly drones. Let me just share my screen here. And there we go. And my chat's in the way, sorry. So I've really been flying drones for about 5 years, and I've always loved anything to do with flight. I used to save up labels from vegetable cans to get free kites with a big picture of the Jolly Green Giant on them. And I got my first model rocket by selling magazine subscriptions to my unsuspecting neighbors, which I promptly lost in the woods after the first launch. But and unfortunately, my drone exploits kind of mirrored that in the beginning, but we won't talk about that. I earned my private pilot's license in the 90s, and when drones came around, it was a perfect fit because you had to be a private pilot to fly drones, and now you don't have to be, but that's beside the point. Some of the places I've done work for are, okay, oh, there we go. Some of the places I've done work for are well, listed here: National Geographic, Today Show, HBO, TLC, Discovery, Travel Channel. And here's a shot of me with in the early 90s on a Travel Channel shoot with Steve Manning, Carnival Cruise Lines. I'm on the right, Steve's on the left. Steve, by the way, has got a very successful company in California that names things. Igor, it's called. And he names some really high-profile products, companies, relaunches. He's done really well for himself. He's very, talking about creative. He's a very creative guy. When this picture was taken, I'd worked my way up to producer at the Travel Channel. But when I first landed the job, I'd been living in New York City for about a year, freelancing as a production assistant, and thinking I should be further up the ladder because as you always do, you think you know more than you know. I was a couple of years out of college, had a year's worth of experience in the industry, and I kind of thought I knew it all. But like this picture, it tells you a lot, but not because, mainly because it reminds me of the saying, you don't know what you don't know, which to me means you should always be open to new ideas and ways of doing things. Don't just think you know it all because you don't know what you don't know. Let's fast forward a couple of decades, and I'm back in DC doing projects with Maryland Public Television, among other folks. Here's the open door piece I did for MPT that won a regional Emmy Award. This one kind of incorporates much of what I've learned over the years. The importance of collaboration, which I'm going to touch on many times. Being able to approach ideas from different angles, letting the story tell itself. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover today.
A crown jewel among Maryland's many icons.
There we go. Today we're kind of going to go over what it means to be creative and can you learn to be creative. We're also going to find out how the importance of knowing your audience, finding your process, what your process is, how to find it, and what it means to the creative process itself. The importance of letting the story tell itself. I'm really big into that. We'll go into it into detail. I know Storytelling has been something that's been used and overused a lot these days, but I believe that the story can tell itself, and if you let it do that, you get a better product, whatever you're doing. In addition, we'll discuss how to deal with failure and its role in the creative process, what creative seasons are and how to recognize yours and embrace it, and the all important role that collaboration plays or should play in your creative process. Um, in Living to Tell the Tale, Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote, "Novels do not begin the way you want them to, but the way they want to." And let me tell you, this is an absolute truth when it comes to anything creative, not just novels. I don't write novels, but in more than 30 years of my creative life, I have never delivered a piece um, that as I had envisioned it going in. For my production work, whether it be writing, directing, editing, or even drone cinematography, I approach the project exactly the same. I'm fully prepared, but open for new paths to the final work. My process allows the people I meet, the shots I discover, and the narrative that unfolds visually or otherwise. It allows it to shape the final story. And it's all about, I think, it's all about being open to new ideas and directions during the process and trusting yourself uh, to bring it all together in the end. And this is a process that can be used for anything from writing to image gathering to post production. It's not media specific. If you think back, you can probably recall a project where you didn't listen to that inner voice. Maybe you had a preconceived plan as how your project should go. Great. Well, you should always have that. You should always have a plan, a roadmap, something to guide you. Maybe it's a script, maybe it's an outline, a character sketch, whatever. It's probably key in your work. I know it is in mine. However, where it becomes a stumbling block is when we keep that plan even when it's not working. Sometimes we don't know why, other times we do, but stubbornly don't want to let go, whatever that is, holding the piece back. Just remember, your story will tell you where it wants to go. You just have to listen to it. Is there a secret formula? What is creativity? Can you really learn to be creative? It's kind of like asking, how do you make a viral video? Because there's no real way to become creative. The key, I think we're all creative in our own way. I mean, if you're a scientist, you're creative in science. You're putting things together. You're putting formulas together. You're coming up with a solution to a problem, and it takes a different way of looking at things. It may be a very stringent way of looking at things, but you've got to look at things from different angles, and that's what creativity is all about. The key is, how do you tap your creativity and cultivate it successfully? Well, there are tools and methods to help you in the creative process. For instance, you can learn how to write a movie. One of my favorite books is called Save the Cat. I don't know if any of you have heard of that or read that. It's by Blake Snyder. Blake was a successful spec script writer in the 1990s. His book makes it seem easy to write a blockbuster movie, and it's highly motivating. I've applied his techniques to much shorter scripts. I'm talking 8 to 10 minute shorts, and it's helped the stories tremendously. However, you still have to have the idea to apply his framework to. And the point I guess I'm trying to make is that there are techniques that you can apply to your creative process that will help you be more productive. And let's look at a few of those before we move on. First, you need a place for everything. The French have a culinary term that basically translates to everything in its place. It means, have a place for everything. Okay, so you say, how does this apply to me? It applies to you because you don't want to waste time looking for something when the creative idea hits you. You don't want to be fiddling around looking for your tools, learning something new. You want to be ready when, the creative spark is there. Whatever your creative endeavor, the tools that you use um, in the creation of that art should have their own spot and should go back to where they need to go when you're done. And you should know how to use them, where they are, or you just waste a lot of valuable time. Especially true if your medium includes digital files. I'll be the first to say that I am lacking in my, uh, uh, I guess, sorting of my digital files. Um, but because everything's digital these days, but it's important that you have some level of knowing where everything is and have some structure and to your tools and the mediums that you use. But make sure you have a place for everything actually, and it gets in back to where it needs to go. Because whenever I'm missing something, it's usually because I've been on the road, had to repack, and things had to go in different places to fit, and they haven't quite made it back to their loving home yet. The long and short of it is a place for everything and everything in its place. The next thing to remember is to be prepared. Remember, you probably heard it 100 times before. You got to be prepared when luck comes calling. Scout the location ahead of time. Research your subject and get there early. Because the early bird gets the worm, but the early bird also has time to look around and see something they might have missed in another time. Here's a shot of the Key Bridge in Washington. To get this shot, I had to know what time of the day the sun hit the bridge. Okay, that's easy. If I'd done a bit more research, though, I would have found out that the Georgetown sculling team passes by each morning at 8, which was about 5 minutes after I got there, not enough time to set up. Making the shot better, it's all part of being more creative. Here's the DC waterfront, and this we did a scout. We knew exactly when to shoot this, and it's not just in the morning, but there's a time in the morning where the water is like glass, and it just makes for a much prettier shot. I mean, it depends on what you're going for, but that's what we were going for here, of course. And of course, it all has to do with being prepared, getting there early, making sure that you know what's going on, and doing your research. It just makes you better all the way around. If you're prepared, you can think about the composition, about the brush strokes, about the motivation, rather than wasting time on tools and tech or trying to figure out what you're going to do when you get there. Okay. So maybe this is a lot of stuff you've heard before. Let's go on and see if we can get to what you've, maybe why you're actually here, something you haven't heard yet. Can you learn to be creative? Let's think about what creativity is, first of all. Lots of time, creativity is looking at things in a different way. Seeing things from different angles. For some folks, that's easy. It comes naturally. Their reality is so bent, or they're so bent that their reality is coming from a different angle and it's different from everybody else. Those people we call creative geniuses. I'm unfortunately not a creative genius, and for me and some of the rest of us, we have to learn to be creative. And the first step is actually to look. Just look around. Actually see what's around you. Okay, it's simple, but we're so busy that we don't see what's in front of us a lot of times. Take the time to look around and see what's here. Having a drone in my toolkit, I see some pretty cool things, but I still have to think out of the box. Here's one of my favorite shots. Of course, the drone was put in there later for an ad we did, but the actual composition this is a construction site, a runoff pond. And I just like the way that the grass and all the shapes met each other and the light playing on the top. I thought it was a really pretty shot. But you got to kind of look for these things because they don't necessarily scream, look at me. You have to look for them. You have to look from different angles. So look. That's my message there. Now, another good way to grow your creativity is to study the work of others. I know if you're an artist or if you went to art school, which I didn't do, you've probably studied other photographers, other painters, especially. I know that traditional artists and painters study the work of the masters, and they try and figure out what makes them good and what makes it good. Well, if that's a perfect way to do anything. If you're, for instance, if you're an aspiring comic, you should be watching and going to shows all the time, watching other people. Notice how others do it. Think about what gets laughs and why. If you're a photographer, take a look at your favorites, see what they've done. I'm constantly studying the work of other drone pilots and asking questions if I need to. Sorry, somebody is calling me here. Let me silence my phone. um, so I constantly study other drone pilots and hopefully I'll get some takeaways on that because I've learned that I also go back and look at my old work. It keeps me humble because if you go back far enough, it's like you find some really terrible stuff that at some point you thought was really good. So it's a constant process of looking at other people's work, looking at your work, questioning it, and how can you make yourself better? It just makes you better all the way around. Now, another way of doing something is taking classes from successful people in your field. Just make sure the instructor is an active person, somebody who's active in this field, not just instructing because they can't do anything else. Talk to somebody who's taking the class. See if they've liked it, what they've gotten out of it. Read some reviews about it. Sometimes the ones teaching aren't necessarily current on the industry. They end up teaching bad habits or outdated techniques. And let's talk about YouTube while we're here. And you can find thousands, hundreds of thousands of videos on how to do just about anything, probably on what you want to do and to help your creativity. But you got to be careful because there are a lot of talented people sharing their knowledge and expertise. But you also find plenty of hacks espousing questionable and downright dangerous actions. Be diligent, know who you're taking advice from. Another way you can help your creativity is to regularly exercise your creative muscle. Be a gardener. And I don't mean literally. I guess if you want to, you can. I find gardening very helpful. It gets me out of my head and just in the moment of what I'm doing. But be a gardener, exercise your creative muscle. Make it part of your daily routine to write out 10 ideas a day. If you're a comic, that's 10 jokes. If you're a songwriter, 10 songs or 10 song ideas. If you're writing 10 songs a day, you're probably already very prolific and you already have some hit songs. So 10 song ideas a day. TV producer, 10 show ideas. A painter, a photographer, 10 subjects of your brush or lens. The only way you grow your creative muscle is to do. When I started doing this and when I was developing TV shows, I'd write out at one point I had an exercise where I'd write out 10 show ideas each morning. And at first it was really, really hard. After a while, your subconscious mind works for you and it starts getting easier. And to be honest, 99% of what you write in these daily lists won't be usable. Let's be honest. But a lot of times they lead to other ideas, and the exercise that helps, the exercise itself will help keep your mind flexible. Next, find your inspiration. This is really important. You need a source of inspiration. You need to be inspired from somewhere. I know I can't inspire myself all the time. In his book, Steal Like an Artist, Austin Kleon goes into how to take inspiration from others. And he's not really talking about stealing, of course. The inspiration is what he's talking about. Perhaps you notice, for instance, how another comic screams at the audience as part of their routine. Stealing that idea wouldn't necessarily mean going out and screaming at your audience too. It would mean maybe looking at that, figuring out what angle works for you. Maybe instead of yelling, maybe your angle is speaking softly or incorporating a different language or adding music. You're not copying or stealing the delivery or content. You're taking the concept and expanding on it and saying, oh yeah, look at this, and coming at it from a different angle and applying it to what might work for you in particular. But if you haven't read this book, I'd suggest getting it and reading it. It's actually pretty good. It's not that expensive, and you probably find it used. In fact, I'll loan you mine. I have it right here somewhere. Another source of my inspiration is two folks who call themselves Joe and Biagio. Now, I like to refer to them as two of the hardest working producers in Hollywood, and they share their secrets for free. Their podcast is called Producing Unscripted at producingunscripted.com. I highly recommend that whatever your creative endeavor, whatever your pursuit is, that you listen to this. Listen to a few of them. Start from the beginning. I think they've got like 100 episodes out now. But their production company is called Joke Productions, and they're responsible for producing hundreds of hours of network TV programming. When they started, though, they had a really hard time getting their foot in the door. Anybody who's tried to produce television and tried to create television and pitch their ideas, you know how hard it is. It's really, really difficult. So once they finally sold their first show, they said, we're going to help other people. We're going to help other people get their foot in the door. So they've created this mechanism to where you can pitch your shows to them. And of course, what's in it for them is if they like it, they'll shepherd it through the process, and they will help you, get your program hopefully sold. You don't have to go with them, but anyway, it's a way for them to get some content, and it's a way for you to get your foot in the door. And the podcast is all about that. But and of course it's aimed at reality television because that's what they do. But the overall passion and creative energy that they exude is powerful. I cannot emphasize this. Their guests include directors, writers, producers, editors, music composers, anything creative. They've probably interviewed them, and you've probably heard of at least 50% of the people they've interviewed. And they are so approachable, and it really was an inspiration to me. I still keep in touch with them. I talked to Biagio, the guy. Her last name is Joke. His last name is Biagio. And by the way, he was a child actor. He was on a show called Keenan and Cal, I guess it is, with the guy from Saturday Night Live, whose name escapes me now. But he was like the next door neighbor kid. Anyway, just a little aside there. But he does this now. Very cool guy, very cool duo. And they're in LA. And find that podcast and just listen to the first few episodes, or pick and choose. If you want. But my whole point is find your inspiration. This is one of mine, and I continue to listen to their stuff, and they just are very inspirational, even though I don't do reality television anymore. So next, do something. Do anything. Don't sit around trying to think what to do anything. 4 years ago, I started a short-lived podcast, and I say short-lived, I don't know, I did maybe 25 episodes. And I did it because I wanted to see what it would take. I wanted to do it. I just wanted to figure it out. And what did it take? It took a lot of work, that's for sure. But in the process, I was energized. I was energized by the creative people I met and talked to, and just about the whole process. By the way, if you know Jeff Kulik, then you know what I'm talking about. This is one of the episodes here, the artwork for one of the episodes where I interviewed Jeff Kulik.
Right. I was going to ask if that was Jeff Kulik. Yeah.
Great guy. And Jeff is just, if any of you know Jeff, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know Jeff, he did this thing a few years back called Heavy Metal Parking Lot. Years ago, him and the guy on the left in the picture, who's, I'm drawing a blank on his name, his partner in this, they went to what was the Capitol Center. They took a camera and they just interviewed people at a Judas Priest concert. And it became a cult classic, a short film called Heavy Metal Parking Lot.
Yeah, with John Hain.
John Hine, yes, yes, John Hine. Sorry,
And
John.
Keenan Thompson is who you were trying to think of
Yes,
from
Keenan,
SNL,
yes.
who I love. I love him too.
I'm brain dead today. So they went out and they did this. It became a short, and he's been doing these things. He's been doing a whole lot of things. He runs around doing all different things, um, short films and things. But he's doing all these shorts based on that parking lot theory. He did something outside a Harry Potter. When Harry Potter was big, all these kids waiting in line to get the Harry Potter book, get in the movie, called Harry Potter Parking Lot. It was kind of angled after that. But Jeff is all over the place. A very creative guy. He is a survivor, a creative survivor. He does what it takes to do what he wants to do and be creative. It's very. He's one of those people that I really look up to. So that was one of my podcasts. Um, so my point is, many times our creativity has us sitting alone in a room by ourselves with our computer. To stay fresh, you got to get out. You got to get involved. Join a group. Participate. You've probably heard it 100 times. Join Women in Film. Join TIVA. Join whatever. Get out. Join the group. Participate. Volunteer. Teach a class. Sit on a panel. In fact, Louisa Winters is my drone partner in Mid Atlantic Drones. We met on a panel at Interface Media through TIVA. We were on the panel and we started working with each other with drones, hiring each other. Excuse me. And then, a year later, we formed our company because we worked so well together. So that's another thing about it. Find somebody you work well together, and hang out with them. You don't have to form a company, but you need these creative people around you. Now, another ingredient in the creative recipe is to know your audience, and that may seem simple, but that'll dictate your approach. In many cases, guide your style. And the thing is, sometimes your audience isn't the final audience. It's not the person who, if you're doing a TV show, is going to be watching it on television. You may think it is, but it's not. In fact, most of the time, I find my audience to be the client, unless you're well established, and even then, in many cases, the client is the one who gives you notes. Your executive producer tells you what's wrong with the piece. Hopefully they know their audience, so you are working for the final viewing audience. But chances are, they may have different ideas, or you may have different ideas about your audience than they do. So, know your audience, and they're the boss. Usually, it's the person who's paying you, because the client has the final say, and the client gives you the notes, which my notes are falling down here. Sorry. The next thing to remember is don't get lost in the minutia. Prioritize. Spend time on things that matter, because it's just important that you don't spin your wheels a lot. You can get really frustrated. And this is where knowing your audience comes in handy. When I first moved to New York, one of my first jobs was producing the in-flight video magazine Ambassadors Theater for an airline. It was the stuff that plays before movies and longer flights, or the that you see on the shorter flights with all the weird ads and the movie trailers in them and stuff. I produced that. And we didn't have our own editing equipment at the time, so we do it out of house. And sometimes I'd find myself spending a crazy amount of time on the slate. And if you don't know what a slate is, it's a visual identifier. It used to come up at the start of a program with things like the program title, runtime, producer name, edit facility name, and a countdown. It's the first frame of the program, and nobody really sees it except for the guy who puts the tape on in the broadcast house. So here am I, New York City. I'm paying $300 an hour for something that only the guy in the program department back in the TV station would see. My point is, prioritize. Spend your time and energy on things that matter. And speaking of things that matter, you got to trust yourself. Um, You gotta know who you are, and you gotta be comfortable with your style and your working style, and that you're um, uh, the people who hired you for a reason. But you also have to be willing to help to enlist the help of others. I think Yuta Goldman's on here. I saw him in the audience at one point. He was my producing partner for a long time at Moondog Entertainment. We did a lot of stuff for Discovery. We worked really well together, and we still work well together. I mean, he's a very creative guy, and I trust his judgment. And when I was doing Down the Ocean Hunt, a show for Maryland Public Television, my client, executive producer, kept sending back the very first segment with notes that never really targeted any problems. And after a bunch of back and forth, it was putting us way behind. I called Yuta, my old producing partner, and Yuta reassured me. He said, "Listen, man, they hired you for a reason because they knew and trusted my work." That's what he said, and that I had to trust myself. So, that helped. That helped a lot. But so we in that light we put that segment aside for a while, and we focused on the rest of the show. And then later we sat down and looked at the original piece, made some really hard decisions about the content, and we were really able to move forward on that. But my point is, trust yourself, but make sure you enlist the help of others when you need to, and it's somebody that you trust. And we'll talk about that more later on. But this leads me to my next point. You gotta kill your darlings, man. The shot you took so much time setting up. The guy in the canoe here in the early morning that was so beautiful, or the shot of the jet ski that took so long to get. You know, or the character in the novel based on your old girlfriend that just shouldn't be there. If it doesn't fit, if it doesn't move your story forward, whatever your story is, you got to cut it. This is a beautiful shot. It didn't make the show because it didn't work. There was nowhere to put it. You have these beautiful shots. You got up at 4 a.m. to get this shot, and you're trying to shoehorn it in. If it doesn't move your story forward, you got to lose it. You got to kill your darling. And this is where a good producing partner or support team comes in handy. Your collaborators. Call them in, but make sure you listen hard to what they have to say. It's not always easy, but they're usually saying what you already know but don't want to admit. So take their advice, kill your darlings. Make your piece better. So, another thing I find helpful. Anybody, first of all, any questions? I haven't heard many questions. I'm babbling here. I'm going to take a drink here.
Feel free just to jump in with a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another thing I find helpful is to have a process, and that may sound simple, like, oh, I know I got a process. Well, you know what? Yeah, for the longest time, I had a process. I didn't know what it was, and chances are you probably already have a process, but maybe you aren't aware of it. Find your process and embrace it. None of us is creative or productive 100% of the time. At least I know I'm not. We've got productive times, not so productive times, and even less than that at some times where you just go out and take a walk, hopefully, and get away from everything. You got to have a process to get through those times when the juices aren't flowing, when things just aren't working, when you're not feeling it. If you're lucky, maybe it involves an isolated cabin by the woods or something. I don't know.
So Yehuda is asking in the chat, what if you're tapped? What do you do?
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being tapped, man. I'm sorry, that's an inside joke.
Okay.
Okay, here's what it was. Yuda and I were working at a company, and we were doing the Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus video. We were doing a pitch for them. We were in a meeting to come up with a pitch for them, and we're basically going back and forth with ideas. It's me, him, and a third guy, and I hadn't really chimed in a whole lot over the course of the meeting. And I say one thing, I come up with an idea, I forget what it is, and they look at me and they just kind of dismiss it, and then it's like, what else you got? I'm like, well, that's it. I'm tapped, man. I'm tapped. Okay, that's the inside joke. Now, anytime something comes up, I don't have an idea.
But but Mike, but Mike, but that was our pitch, and we were giving them the inside brainstorm, and we won the pitch because of that and the humor.
Yeah,
and we did win the pitch from that.
we
So,
won the pitch.
but that was your
Okay.
key line. Yeah.
Thank you for saving my anecdote.
All about the humor.
So tapped, yes, thank you. Well, we did. We won that. We did it. It was kind of fun. Shooting at the circus. That's another big story. Thank you, Yuta. So find your process, make it yours. Whatever it is. When for instance, when I write a script, let's go back to that. When I write a script, I start by piecing it together with the interview sound bites only in the first draft, even if it's not that kind of a piece. I read through the transcripts. I usually work with transcripts. If I have to, I'll listen to the interviews over again, because that gets, it's like, I don't know if you've ever gotten lost in a music library. You're looking for a cut of music and you go down the rabbit hole and it's like, oh, I actually start getting ideas for shows and pieces just by listening to different cuts of music in a music library. And I'll find myself like for a couple of hours running down this rabbit hole. It's like YouTube, only it's with a music library, because I'm off on all these tangents saying, oh, that's just work good for this, saving this to a different folder. But that's how it works in my creative head for interviews and writing scripts and things. I do that. So I'll cut something together, or I'll do a string out of a script based on the interviews only, and then I'll fill in the holes and cut it down and add some voiceover and stuff, and until it really starts to take root. And that's kind of my basic process, and it works for me. It may not work for you. Maybe you have a process, but no matter what your process is, don't let anybody tell you it's wrong. They can give you suggestions, and but what works for somebody else may not work for you. So you're at liberty to take or leave their suggestions. Don't let them tell you what's wrong. Everyone has a process. Find yours, embrace it, and make it part of your whole routine. Just make sure, this leads me to my next point, just make sure that your process includes storytelling. And I know everybody's a storyteller. I tell stories. It's overused these days. We're tired of hearing about storytellers. But the truth is, it's all about storytelling. Everything, no matter what you do, you're telling a story. It might not be in words, but you have to evoke emotion and connect with the audience. And the way you do that is through storytelling techniques. You got to have a story, and you got to tell it well. The longer the piece, the more important story becomes to holding the audience's attention. It's easy to string a few quick cuts together to some catchy music, keep the viewer's attention. That's all the rage these days. But the longer the piece, the less interesting that technique becomes. You need ups and downs. You need dramatic punctuation, keep the viewer engaged, and the piece moving forward. Wait a minute, you say, I'm not a writer, I'm a photographer, or I'm a painter, or I'm a videographer. It doesn't matter. You still got to tell a story with your art. Videographers do it with moves. Painters and photographers do it with the backstory they evoke, and through the images they create, and the way they work with light. Now that I fly drones, I do it with the moves in my shots and the editing together of specific shots to achieve a certain effect. It's the buildup of emotion, of tension, and then its release. So we like to fly close to things like this shot and reveal things. That's part of telling a story. It's a one-shot story. And another example is this one. Just going to play for a second. So this is from a short social media campaign we did. We called it We Fly. It was a We Fly series. This one in particular, we tried to tell the story through one shot. Well, they all did, but this one in particular was an homage to the old westerns, where again. The old westerns, where the favorite line was always like, "We ride at dawn." So we found music to sound like "The Good, the Bad, the Ugly," and put on a title that said "We Fly at Dawn." So I think it went pretty well, even if you didn't get the western reference. And it was a pretty good shot too. Now remember, creativity is about seeing things differently, coming at problems from a different angle, finding a workaround. For instance, the client wants their building shot at sunrise. At first glance, you seem to have two choices: either shoot the subject or shoot the sunrise, right? If you shoot the subject, and this is something you got to tell your client, by the way, if you shoot the subject, you don't see the sunrise, but the subject's bathed in that nice, warm, soft light. You shoot the sunrise itself, and you don't see the subject, sort of like this backlit thing here. But you know, you can do certain things with this. Like we were going for the backlit. It's kind of evoking the early morning feeling in this shot, for instance. So we had a shoot recently where this was exactly the thing. But the client wanted us to shoot this logo on this building, but the logo, he wanted us to do it at sunrise, but the logo, the sun rose behind us. So we're shooting the logo and the sun's behind us. Yeah, we can get a shot of the logo with the light on it, but it's not getting the glint that he wanted. It's not getting the shot of the sunrise. So what we did was we came up with a solution, and we were lucky in this case in that we used reflections. Here's the building. This is one of the actual shots. So the sun's rising behind us. The building is lit by the sunrise, and we see the sunrise in the reflection of the building. So first of all, you gotta be lucky and have a building with windows in it, and the lights off early morning. So it causes a reflection. And then you gotta be creative enough, I don't know, to be able to see this, to look at it from a different angle and think about this. You got to think, well, how do we show him everything he wants? You know, so you know, the way, I mean, he wanted the glint on the letters. We got that as well. So my point is, you got to think of things differently. You got to think of things. You got to troubleshoot sometimes to try and get what the client wants, and you also have to sometimes say, no, that's not going to happen. We were lucky; we were able to do what they wanted, and in basically all cases, and they loved it. Let's go. Okay. So anyway, so think out of the box, as I say. Sometimes you get an assignment, and it's your task to figure out how to make it work. The piece I did for Maryland Public Television, which was shot entirely on a drone, which is some of the clips you're seeing here, it originally started out as a half-hour special, but it eventually evolved into a 15-minute segment. I mean, the problem is, you know, if you're shooting a half an hour show and it's all 100% pretty shots, you're going to be shooting for an entire year to get what you need. This is just a big bear. So it turned into a 15-minute segment. And the big challenge at that point was to, how do you go from A to Z and not be boring? The EP wanted to focus on sites around Maryland, but there wasn't anything to tie it together. When we started planning the shooting, eventually it was obvious the central theme here should be water. One, because they really wanted to show Ocean City. And two, it just seemed like we could get from place to place to place, show bridges as part of the theme and that kind of thing. So we went from the Eastern Shore all the way to the Western Shore, and the result was what we called Water from the Air, and an Emmy Award for the piece, actually. And of course, not everything is going to get an Emmy, and in fact, you're probably going to come up short sometimes. On a lot of your ideas, you're going to have a lot of clunkers. I know I have. When that happens, just remember, it's okay. And as corny as it sounds, failure is an option. Just remember that failure is an option, and sometimes it's the only option. Not that you planned it that way, but sometimes it just works out that way. You're not going to hit a home run every time you come to bat. I know you've heard that 100 times, but it's true. You're going to strike out a few times, and it's okay. Don't let it defeat you, man. Just, and I know that's, you know, if you got a job or if you're a freelancer, especially if you're a staff guy, your failures are probably less um, uh, threatening than if you're a freelancer. You're a freelancer, you're only as good as your last job. So you pull out a stinker, and you know it's chances are if you haven't been working with this client for a long time, you're not going to work for him again. So the pressure's on. I get that, but try not and don't let it defeat you. Always try and learn from your failures. Ask questions like what went wrong, why wasn't it well received. Ask your client, what could have been done differently. And this isn't to point fingers or place blame on anybody, but it's rather to see what you can learn from the entire experience. Have confidence in yourself and set your sights on the next one. I mean, if this is, it's probably not your first. It's probably not your first production, is what I'm trying to say. So you have some to look back on and say you have been successful. You know what you're doing. Just remember that. Sometimes you're just going to fail because I mean, look at Julia Childs. She said the only real stumbling block is fear of failure. In cooking, you gotta have a what the hell attitude. And sometimes and cooking is very creative, and sometimes in television, as a photographer, as a writer, whatever you're doing, as a music composer, sometimes you gotta say what the hell, and you just gotta move on and one, don't think about your past failures and move past your current failures, but also don't be afraid to fail because sometimes you're the windshield, as Lyle Lovett said, and sometimes you're the bug. So it's not always going to work out the way you want to, and just remember that and don't let it get you down. But a good way to get you through these times is to remember to embrace the season. Another quote from some guy nobody knows. Okay, you probably know Thoreau. I don't know if you knew Julia Childs, but Henry David Thoreau said, live each season as it passes. Nobody is creative all the time. No, I said that. He said the other thing. Nobody's creative all the time. Creativity comes in waves and circles. Recognize your cycle and be ready for it when it starts over. I mean, this goes hand in hand with finding and refining your process. I've been fortunate enough with most of my jobs to be able to take my time, step away from projects, come back to them. And it's part of my process, fortunately for me. Identify your cycle and what enhances it. Just nurture your cycle, run with it. There'll be times when you'll have to work through projects at the bottom of your creative cycle. I mean, we all do. Most of us aren't fortunate enough to be able to have our own deadlines for everything we do. But if you recognize your creative cycle, your season, it'll allow you to position yourself and your projects more effectively. And it'll also allow you to recognize and accept the dry spells for what they are, temporary bumps in the road. So embrace the season, go full tilt with the creative periods, but allow yourself a break once in a while. And embrace your style. It's what makes your creativity yours. It's why people hire you, and it comes from your experience, your training, yourself. Embrace your style. Don't be afraid to let it evolve and change. Now, let's get to the history part of this. Anybody know what that is? That's what we used to shoot it with. Anybody who's shooting on their cameras these days or on their phone cameras these days won't know what that is, or maybe you've seen it in the museum. Whatever. It's it's a television camera. It's a video camera. This is what we used to use. When I started in TV and video business, it was way different than it is now. Cameras cost tens of thousands of dollars. And they weren't even close to the quality of today's iPhone. 5-person crews were commonplace. We had camera operator, sound guy, producer, director, PA, and that was like a skeleton crew. You get in the studio and you got 10 other people doing stuff that I don't even know what they do anymore. But today the bar to entry is low. Tools are relatively cheap. Technology is very high quality. Having a large support system has gone by the wayside. But besides bringing the technical support, these people also brought creative and artistic talent to your project. So while the creative process is now much more democratic, allowing more people with fewer tools and money to be a part of the process, it's also missing collaboration. Collaboration gives you other points of view to see things you might be blind to from where you are. Nobody can see everything. When you're working with others whose work you respect, they've got your back. They tell you when something's not quite right, or maybe it's not going to work, or simply they give you another way of looking at your material. And at least they should. If you're working with all people who say, yeah, that's great, that's terrific, then you're working with the wrong people. They're only there for the money. But and of course, everybody on every team, somebody's got the ultimate and final say, which is usually the director, or executive producer, or whatever. But when you have other creative options that you couldn't see before, it opens you up to other directions and ultimately makes your project a better one in the long run. So as you can see, I'm all for collaboration. When you find a team, folks you can work with, and who complement your working style and your vision, the yin to your yang, it's like the perfect band. Remember, a band isn't about one instrument, it's about all the instruments playing in harmony. Find your band, keep it together. This is my band at one point. This is the Travel Channel. It's me on the left with an old film camera. We're in Puerto Rico, La Paguera, Phosphorescent Bay. That was some time. Anyway, way back when. My point is, find your band and keep it together. Find people you trust and who you work with. That's really the only way that you will become, not the only way you'll become successful, but you need collaborators, people who can help you get through the rough times and who can help you get through the creative times, who can help you see different pieces of the puzzle and help you put the puzzle together. So position yourself. Very important. Learning to be creative is more about putting yourself in situations that allow you to be stimulated, to help you nurture your creative spirit. Find your process. Don't let anyone talk you out of what works for you. Listen to your subject and let the story tell itself. Don't be afraid to fail and find your bandmates to collaborate with. Let me go into a little bit of a story talking about failure. I've had my times of failure, and Yuda can chime in anytime. But we when we were doing shows for Discovery, we had a series with Discovery Science, and we got we put together 13 episodes of one, and they loved it, so they called us back for another 13 from the start. We put we lined all these out, they approved them, we started shooting, and it was the best show ever until we got a new executive producer at the network. He calls us in and he says, what's I want to go in a different direction on this. We gotta go in a different direction. We gotta start over. We had shot at least half the episodes by then, I think, and all this has been approved, everything been done, and we'd already started delivering some of the episodes. He said we got to start from the beginning. There was no budget to start from the beginning. They weren't giving us more money. They just said You got to come up with new ideas. You got to reshoot some of these things. We got to retool this whole thing. So we went into high gear, trying to do this. I was the executive producer. Yuta was creative director on the thing, and we had a bunch of producers working with us on that and writers. It was a great, I thought, great creative team. Long and short of it, I ended up getting canned. Yuta took over. He was doing both creative directing and executive producing, and it was, let's say, it was very, very stressful. But this was a Discovery Network show, and as Yuta could probably attest, there are a lot of things that you got to learn when, at least back then, I'm not sure how it is now, but a lot of things you had to learn for deliverables to put these shows together and these series together. Very specific guidelines on things to do. It was a learning curve, but we were doing it. We figured it all out. And when I got canned, it was one of the worst moments in my entire life at that point. I was really devastated because, I thought, we got a series. We had an hour-long documentary we were delivering for Discovery Health. At that time, we had another show that was being syndicated. We thought, man, we're making it. We're on our way. This is happening for us, man. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, bam, I'm gone.
One of my worst moments too.
And I'm kind of, there's an end to the story and a point to it. And the point is, one of our contacts at Discovery had left, and he was freelancing now, and he was on another series, another Discovery series. And I get a call from him a couple of days later. He says, "Hey man, I hear you're in the market again." I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Well, we're working on another series, and we need somebody who knows the discovery process." So, he heard that I was there. He knew I knew the process. He called me up. He knew that I knew, how to do this. He knew I knew how to produce, how to executive produce. So he brought me onto another series that was delivering to Discovery because I knew the process and he knew me and he knew that I could do it. And I went on. I worked a lot of segments for him on that, some stuff for the Home and Garden Channel, a ton of stuff there. So my point is, I was devastated. But out of that, I learned that it's not the end. I mean, if you know what you're doing, you may have some setbacks, and they may be really devastating setbacks. It was really devastating, but somehow you got to pull yourself through. And also, you have a creative team around you. You have people that you work with, people that trust in you. They're going to have your back in that regard too. I mean, Yuta was a great friend to me then. I mean, I leaned on him a lot for moral support at that point. I mean, he couldn't give me any work because he was doing it all there. But it all worked out in the end. And I learned a lot from that. We kind of have a joke that, and by the way, the series that I went to work on, they had just fired everybody except for like the executive producers. All the writers, all the producers were fired. Let them go. Bring in a new staff. So I was the second round, and so the joke on that was always that the first round of producers and directors on any Discovery Network show was like the soldiers that go in and throw themselves on the barbed wire so that the second team can run over them and make it over the barbed wire. So they sacrifice themselves for the second team to be successful. And that's basically what happened there. So I was lucky to be on the second wave in that case. So my second life. Anyway, so my point there is failure. Yeah, it can be devastating. It's not fun when you're going through it. Try and get through it any way you can, and know that you know what you're doing. Hopefully, and just use that to fall back on. And don't be afraid to reach out to people. And hopefully, you've got collaborators who have your back and who you can who can reassure you when you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. They can say, no, you know what you're doing, and you're good. And hopefully, one of them will call you and give you work.
So Mike, we have a few questions in the chat. Maybe they could ask you, Albert, are you Would you want to ask? He's,
Albert Zogby?
uh-huh.
Yeah, what drones do you use? Well, we use, you know what? We've used a lot of drones, and our workhorses now, believe it or not, are I use the Phantom 4 Pro. I got like three of those. My drone partner uses the Mavic 2. We're about to get the Mavic 3 that just came out. It's an amazing tool. But those are our two workhorses. We also have a couple of uniques. We have the Skydio, which is an autonomous one. We have two of those. So and a couple of other little things. We got to pair it just because it looks up, and we use it for different things. So, but our workhorses are the Phantom 4 Pro version 2 and the Mavic 2, soon to be replaced with the Mavic 3. And they come in handy. If we need anything else, we also have an Inspire 2 that we can use interchangeable lenses on. But most of our work we get with the Phantom and the Inspire.
Okay, great. And Elizabeth is asking, in which circumstances that you showed, did you have to get permission to fly the drone due to regulations, especially in the DC area?
Yeah, well, we specialize in the DC area mainly because we've been flying ever since they put the freeze. It's called the DC freeze, the DC flight restricted zone. And that's a 15-mile, basically a 15-mile ring around the airport, National Airport. A little bit less than that. But anyway, we kind of grew into that process. They didn't have a process in the first, when they first put the restriction on, you couldn't fly at all. No way to get through. They finally started coming up with a process. So we kind of grew into it. We know the guys there pretty well. We've been working, I guess it's been, we've been flying for over 5 years. I think my drone partner's been flying for like 7. And I think the freeze has been in place for 4 years, or the mechanism to fly in the freeze. So it's very stringent. You have to, file flight plans, security plans. They do security check on all your crew. If you're flying within 7 nautical miles, you got to hire law enforcement at your expense and your budget expense. And you have to have extra personnel. So there's a very rigid and strict process in place that you have to adhere to. So yeah, there are things you have to do to fly in DC. It's not impossible, but most drone pilots don't know how to do it, or just don't want to go through the process. So we've been very fortunate to be able to master that. So we get a lot of work in what we call the freeze. Let's see. Oh, Erica.
Okay.
Hey, Erica, how are you?
Good, Mike. How are you doing?
Good. I'm good.
Good. Well, Lisa asked me to say mine out loud, even though I think you can see it in the chat. But it's basically, I've really enjoyed hearing what you had to say about the creative process. And I'm curious, actually, how you see it differently, because you do a lot of works for hire, and then you do, your own projects as well. So do you have a different approach to the creative process for each of those, and how do they sort of inform each other?
Yeah. No, I don't really have a different approach. But when you're being paid for something, a lot of times you can't do everything you want to do. Your client pulls you back, or they may want to do something totally different, or they just, they may not let you kill your darlings. They may not let you kill their darlings. So you have to shoehorn stuff in there. You may have to use people that they want to use. And that's, you got to make those sacrifices. It's not your show. But your job is to tell them what you think they should do with your experience. That's your job. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing your job. So your passion projects, or the things that you're able to go full tilt and have total creative freedom on, those inform the ones where you're not, because they basically allow you to use your experience to hopefully convince the client what they should do, and use your experience to convince them. Because a lot of times, you can have a good reason why. For instance, if somebody wants to use somebody, and this is a classic case we probably all run into, they want to use somebody in the company, who isn't very good. When it's not it's not a situation for that. They should be using an actor, for instance. There are cases when you want somebody who's authoritative and has that clout and things, and you hopefully can coach them into it. But there are times when, it calls for an actor, somebody who knows how to present themselves on camera. And in that case, you have to use your experience. One that works for me in that case, for instance, is that, okay, we'd be happy to do that, but we're going to have to increase the budget because we're going to spend more time shooting, we're going to spend more time editing, we're going to spend more time going through those edits. And, and use arguments like that, and you appeal to hopefully their other sense, which is money, and they come around to some extent. But yeah, you use your experience and your creative experience to inform those projects where hopefully, they'll come around a little bit.
Mike, I like to just add to that, and I sort of define it similar to how you're, but I say one's a creative professional and the other is a professional creative. You could be a creative professional and just be, good at what you do and get paid. But if you're a professional creative, you're an artist, but your job is to take your client's vision and make that come alive with all the restrictions that come with that: budget, deadline, everything that you mentioned. And a successful professional creative masters that and goes through that process and is still able to bring a great product, but with all those restrictions on it. Where when you're doing your other side and you have that passion project, then you're wide open and you don't have those restrictions. And I think a really, it's in some ways easier to be an unfettered artist, but to be a successful creative, professional creative is a lot harder because you're dealing with those restrictions and still have to deliver a product that's going to satisfy your client.
And that's a very, very good point. And in fact, doing it that way, where you have those restrictions, and actually, you got to look at things from a different angle. You got to come up
Restrictions are
with
good. Deadlines are good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If you don't have a deadline, never get anything done.
Right.
I've got a film sitting in my basement.
I know you do.
Okay. Okay, so I think Elizabeth was going to ask a question. Elizabeth, are you there?
Yeah, do you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, thank you.
Hey.
It's been thank you. Well, I guess from having been an employer, okay, and having employees, a lot of times employees don't understand or don't like what the employer is asking them to do. And it's similar in the process of being hired, to do something that the boss wants to do in your process as well. So, but can you tell us about a time when the customer or employer was doing something you thought was crazy wrong, and then you realized how it worked and you learned something from it?
No, not specifically. No, I'm always right.
Just one.
I can't think of any. I'm sure there are times when that's happened, and in fact, I welcome that because I'm for one, I'm not. I don't know everything, and I've finally realized I don't know everything. So what I like to do is hopefully I understand. My approach to any project is to understand what the client is trying to achieve in the end. A client, if you're a cameraman, we've all had clients come and say, hey, I want to use this camera, I want to use this lens, and I want to do this and that. Well, you know what? It's not about the tools, or it's not about the specific camera. Maybe you want to match something you did before. I understand that, but I need to know what you're trying to achieve. Why are you saying that? Why do you want to use a specific camera? Because my approach is, if I understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, I know the tools to make that happen. And hopefully it's that way all along the entire process. So I am, if I understand what you're trying to do from the beginning, we won't have that misunderstanding. and hopefully I'll feel comfortable asking you why you want that. But my whole job as the creative guy that you've hired with the experience, hopefully, is to bring my experience and my creative ability, hopefully, to the project, to what you're trying to achieve, and figure out how to get there. Okay, maybe you've got some ideas on how to do that. I'll listen to that. And it's also my job to listen to what your ideas are. Because, I mean, let's face it, clients are creative people. And just because I have an idea of how I should do something doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. And just because the client has an idea doesn't make it wrong. In fact, it's probably right because they're paying the bills. But um, um, it's a give and take process, and both sides should be open to listening to both sides.
Creativity is very subjective too. So
Yeah, it's true. Yes, it's like comedy, very subjective, very subjective.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Great. Mike, I was wondering, how did you had been a video and filmmaker for many years, and then you more recently got into combining it with the drone work. How did you get into that?
Well, when drones started becoming a thing, um, it was, well, let's go back. When they started regulating drones, let's say that at one point you could fly drones when they first came out. You could fly them anywhere. You could do anything you wanted, and pretty soon they said, oh, we got to put a stop to this. So that's when they started regulating them. And when they first started regulating, you had to be a pilot. You had to be a private pilot to actually
Oh,
fly a drone. I had my pilot's license, so I said, well, I love flying. I love television and producing. I think, I like photography. I like shots, and I think I have a pretty good eye in some respects. So I thought it was a perfect fit. So that's how I got into it. I was a pilot, and I worked at the FDA. They taught me how to do it. They bought all the really expensive toys. The FDA doesn't fly drones anymore, unfortunately, but that's how I got into it. Eventually, they loosened the regulations. They changed it so that anybody could fly drones. It's called Part 107 now. It's a certificate. They call it a drone license. It's technically a Part 107 certificate. Who cares, right?
oh,
But you can get that. So basically, you study for it, you take a test, and you can get your 107 drone license now. But I got into it because you had to be a pilot, and it was a very fortuitous circumstance in a route. Everything aligned. So,
about when was that? Like 10 years ago or
no,
so?
no, that was like 5 years ago. I think I've had
Oh,
before. Yeah, it's been about 5 years. Yeah.
right. Oh, so
actually, Mike,
interesting.
I'm just going to say this. Mike's been humble. I mean, I've worked with numerous drone pilots over my career, and it's amazing when they don't know what they're doing, how disastrous it can be. And you're eating up your daylight, you're eating up a budget, you're eating up your time. And Mike and Louisa are bar none the finest drone pilots I've ever seen or worked with. These guys are just awesome, and they do know how to get the permits, and they can do amazing things. So if you're ever in the market for drone guys, it's these guys right here.
Thanks, Yuta. Checks in
No,
the
I mean it.
mail.
I mean, man.
Checks
No,
in the
you are.
mail.
You guys rock. You guys are really, really good, man. And I would be honest with you. So, absolutely.
And where do you go in DC to get permission?
Well, it's actually an online submission process. It's called I forget what it's called. I have a link to it. If anybody's interested, I can send them a link. But there's a whole process. They have a document up there that tells you what you need to do, how to do it, and it's separate from any of the other online permissions. There's also, I mean, you can go to there's something called a drone zone. FAA, I think FAA.gov/drone zone, whatever. It's you can go there and you can get waivers and authorizations for airports or things like that. But this is not that. This is totally separate, and it's a very special area they put together for that. So if you're interested, shoot me an email. I can send you the link, and hopefully you can wade your way through it.
Oh,
It's really complicated. Um, it's very specific, and they're rather mean. Not
mhm,
not really, but they've really tightened things up literally in the last month. Because of security
mhm,
concerns in the Washington area and things that are happening now. They've really tightened up on drones. They stood up a new organization um, within the old organization that is in charge of this. They're really paying attention to this. It used to be you may be able to skirt some rules. No, I didn't do that, but I know pilots who maybe maybe kind of wink wink nod nod will do this and nobody will say anything, but you're not going to get away with that. They actually have, I'm convinced they have equipment that can detect drones in flight now. So
mm.
they won't admit that, but I know they do because they'll call us and tell if they think we're flying. If they detect a drone, we've gotten calls uh, anyway during our DC ventures where we're flying, and they say, "Are you where you're supposed to be? We've got a report of a drone here." And it's not us. So,
Right. And so how many others are there like you in the DMV?
there's a couple. We know of two other companies that do this. VSI, Jeffrey Green. I think he's VSI. Um, but Jeffrey Green, and then Hover Solutions, Nathaniel and Stewart at Hover Solutions. Those are two that do it regularly. Jeffrey Green is a former military pilot, Marines, I think, and yeah, he knows the guys. He's a crazy guy, really talented. So those two definitely, um, you know,
Yeah, so it's
no,
still quite
there are,
limited.
it's very limited. I mean, a lot of
Right.
pilots now still don't know how to do it. They're not familiar with the process. And again, it's a very complicated process. It's very nerve-wracking. When you're flying, you need extra personnel. It really, I mean, we charge a whole lot more just because of how difficult it is to get it, how all the hoops you have to jump through before, during, and after the flight and the mission. So it just unfortunately fortunately we grew up with the process, so we were there as things
Mhm.
changed. And I like to think they know us, so they'll call us and tell us if something's wrong in terms of the application rather than rejecting it. So we're pretty fortunate in that respect.
Interesting. Great. I see Catrice has a question for you.
Hi, how are you?
Right.
Thank you. This has been really great. And just before I ask my question, Mike, I do want to say that it's been a very inspiring talk uh,
Oh, thank you.
because it kind of grounds you to know that it's okay to stand in your own creativity and be okay with that, no matter how long it's been. And it's been a while for me. Um, I have experience in TV, but from a very long time ago. So, to ask the question, do you find being a producer and communicating format to new digital media clients, internet and web based, if you do any of that, do you find it has been easy to communicate when not working in teams in the same place, especially with the execution? I want to find out if the execution of the creativity translate well to persons or orgs that really don't have TV experience, but with the advent of new opportunities with new digital media, everyone feels that they can do it, and they can to a degree, but there may be things you have in mind that you're drawing from your experience and you're trying to explain that. How do you bridge all of those communication gaps? And how's that working for you? I asked you like 10 questions. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I kind of I don't really produce a whole lot anymore. I don't really like it anymore. I mean, I like it in that I know how to do it and I can do it with my eyes closed rather easily. And I like the idea that you do something from the beginning to end and you're kind of in control of it. I'm a control freak. Really, the only producing I do now is with Maryland Public Television, I think, and that's just because I like it. I've been working with them for like 20 years. They're really great people, and the Outdoors Maryland pieces I do are really fun, and they leave me alone. I basically get the assignment. I write a paragraph on what it's going to be like, and then I send them a script that they look at or may not look at, and I shoot it, and I send them the finished piece. So I mean, they love it. So it's it's creative freedom. But my point is, I don't like producing anymore. I really concentrated on the drone work, but I feel like I bring my producing background into that and the experience, and that I know, it's like a shooter who's also an editor. You know what you're going to need in the end. If I understand what your project is and what your needs are, I'm going to make sure that I get it. We don't do, for instance, we don't have a day rate. We don't have an hour rate. It's a project rate. I want you to tell me what you need to accomplish, and I'll tell you how I'm going to do it or how I could best do it, and how long it's going to take. And I'll give you a rate, and I'll basically guarantee that I'm going to get you what you need. Don't worry how long it's going to take. Now, of course, there's some circumstances where you're on a film set. They need to know how long it's going to take. How long are these actors going to need to be here? That's different. But for the most part, it's this is how we work. But to your point about the whole communication thing, and we're big believers in Louisa and I both that you got to sit down, you got to be in the same room a lot of times, and that hasn't been easy with COVID. But now we have Zoom. People are used to that. In the beginning, that wasn't it wasn't a comfortable medium, but we're kind of used to it now. Excuse me. But that face to face, whether it's this way or it's actually sitting down with people, which we prefer, I think that adds a whole lot to it, because there are nuances that you don't get otherwise, and you don't get from an email, or you may get the wrong message from an email, for instance. So we like to sit down with people and actually have face-to-face communications. When we close business, or when we have, present things to a client, we want to, a new client, we want to sit down with them. We want to be in the room with them. We want to buy them lunch. We want to let them know who we are, and we want to know who they are, um, and that's face to face. So yeah, it is a big challenge, and everybody thinks that they can do this, and it's, unfortunately, it's been like that with everything. It just, with digital media and television, with the advent of the phone cameras and all that stuff, it just was a whole lot faster. Drones the same way. Everybody thinks they can fly a drone, and you can. They're relatively easy to fly these days, but you can take a great shot, and you can put some processing software, and you got a wonderful still. You try and do video, sorry, you gotta. It's a different skill, but everybody thinks they can do it, and they can to a degree. So you have people out there who are just saying, "Oh, I just need you for an hour. It's just a 10-minute shot, or this or that." Well, yeah, maybe not. So I guess what we have learned to do, and unfortunately we have the luxury of doing, is turning down work. If it's something that doesn't work for us, or is, somebody wants to pay too little, sorry, we're not your folks. Hey, here, we have some folks we know who will work for that, for instance. And it's not disparaging, maybe they have a smaller budget, and we do work with, we work with people who have a small budget. If it's a cause we like, if it's an indie film, we worked on low budget films. We worked on zero budget, or we've worked for free on these deferred payment films, which, yeah, deferred, right? But we either like the person who's doing it or what they're doing, or both. It's somebody who we know that we've worked for, maybe in another capacity, who now know us as a drone people, and they say, "Hey, I got this project I really want to do. We don't have a whole lot of money. Can you work on it?" For instance. So, but my point is, sometimes you just, you have to define who your client is, and then what works for you. And sometimes that takes a long time to do. You got to be able to and ready to turn down work if it doesn't work for you, which a lot of people can't do, and that's understandable. So, but yeah, the whole social media thing. I'm not really. I'm only on Facebook, and I'm only on Twitter and Instagram because I have to be. I don't do it very well, but I have a presence there. We have a presence there as a company, but it's not very. I'm not very efficient at it because I'm too old. I'm not that generation. And so I feel your pain. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but yeah, I feel your pain. I don't have a solution for you. All I know is sometimes the client just isn't the right client. And if you're not hitting it off, I mean, I think chemistry a lot of times is very important. So,
Mm.
but you
Thank
have
you
to have
so
your,
much.
you
I
have to have
want,
your price too. You got to say, first of all, you figure out your business plan. What's your bottom line? You can't take jobs for $50 because you're not working because it costs you money to get there, it costs you money to operate your equipment. You got insurance to pay, you got people to pay. So you do have a bottom line. Figure that out. That will help you go a long way as well.
can I pitch you real quick?
Sure.
Can you and Yuta take a baby mentee? Like I curate events and online, and I produce a segment in an online show. And it's been 300,000 million years since I've stepped into a television studio. But funny how some things come back and are useful. And I have like a million questions.
Listen,
And
no,
can I
I
connect with you
I
too?
have, yeah, you definitely can. Send me an email. Be happy to talk with you. And I'm sure Yuta would too. But producingunscripted.com. I swear, the podcast, I don't know if you heard that part of my presentation
Yeah.
with Joe and Biagio. Listen, it's exactly what you want. Basically, they lay it out from episode one. They say, listen, here's what we're doing. And then they go through and they tell you how to pitch them, how to do it. And then, the first 10 episodes are all about how to pitch them and how to do this, how to get your show, how to do your series and all this stuff. It's perfect. It's exactly what you're looking for.
Okay.
And then from there it gets a little more complicated, a little more diverse. But the first 10 episodes, listen to those, I swear, and get back to me. And after that, I'll answer your questions. But definitely go there, do that. I'm almost
So,
positive they're still up.
so Catrice, I sent you my email. Feel free to connect with me. And actually, I probably have a different perspective on your first question about working remotely, which, we can take offline and I can give you some insight. I've, shot entire commercials from my desk and never left. So, it's sort of the new